The year is 1572. Whitehall Palace stirs before dawn, its kitchens alive, servants rushing through shadowed halls. But in a hidden workshop, time moves differently. Here, Leonard Vauchelet, the Queen's clockmaker, works in near silence, surrounded by the gentle ticking of his creations. His sanctuary is a world apart, orderly, precise, and untouched by the palace's chaos. Leonard, a man of quiet focus, shapes a tiny gear, lost in concentration. The outside world, its noise, its politics, fades away. In this room, time is not a weapon or a whim. It is a science, measured and true. Leonard's clocks are honest, marking each moment with unwavering precision. In a palace built on spectacle and intrigue, his work is a rare constant, and it is this integrity that makes Leonard indispensable to the Queen. Leonard Vauchelet's journey began far from England in the artisan town of Blois, France. Raised by a locksmith father, Leonard's childhood was spent mastering metal and marveling at intricate mechanisms. Apprenticed to a renowned clockmaker, he learned that true mastery required both artistry and engineering. But religious strife forced him to flee as a Huguenot refugee. Arriving in London with only his tools and talent, Leonard started anew. His extraordinary clock soon caught the eye of wealthy merchants and then the court. In an age when most clocks were wildly inaccurate, Leonard's were a revelation. Word of the French master spread quickly. Soon, a royal summons arrived. The Queen herself wished to see the work of this remarkable craftsman. Leonard's fate and England's time would never be the same. At Elizabeth's court, clocks were more than timekeepers. They were symbols of power and modernity. The Queen filled her palaces with timepieces, each a statement of her control over order and progress. Leonard's clocks, with their precision and artistry, became prized possessions and diplomatic gifts. The court's routines shifted, bells signaled meetings, schedules grew strict, and the Queen's days ran with mechanical precision. Leonard's role was unique. He was trusted to maintain the very rhythm of the monarchy. His creations, adorned with engravings and astronomical dials, were masterpieces of both science and art. When the Queen presented one as a gift, it was a message. England was at the forefront of innovation. Leonard, though not a noble, had rare access to the Queen, summoned to her chambers to present or adjust his clocks. In these private moments, he was more than a craftsman. He was the keeper of the Queen's time. His work was the silent engine behind the order of Elizabethan power. In a world of shifting alliances, his clocks offered certainty. Leonard's precision became the pulse of the court, and in that precision, the Queen found both order and advantage. Life as the Queen's clockmaker was both privilege and pressure. My workshop was a sanctuary, but also a prison. Every clock had to surpass the last. Innovation was relentless. Failure was not an option. Each piece was crafted by hand, every gear and spring demanding hours of painstaking labor. The physical toll was immense. Aching back, tired eyes, calloused hands. The mental strain was worse. A single miscalculation could ruin weeks of work. I worked in solitude apart from the court's intrigues, my focus absolute. While others schemed, I labored in silence, driven by the pursuit of perfection. My reward was not wealth or status, but the satisfaction of a flawless mechanism. I was at the center of power, yet always an outsider. My clocks ticked on, marking time in a world that rarely stood still. It was a lonely, consuming passion, but it was mine. Despite my skill, I was always an outsider, a Frenchman in a suspicious English court. My accent and origins made me a target for rumors and distrust. In Elizabeth's world of spies and plots, every foreigner was a potential threat. I knew I was watched. A careless word or wrong acquaintance could be fatal. Accusations of espionage were never far away, even without evidence. I survived by keeping to my workshop, avoiding politics, and letting my work speak for me. My clocks were my shield. As long as I was useful, I was protected. But I knew that protection was fragile, dependent on the Queen's favor. Every tick of my clocks was a reminder. My time at court was always precarious. Precision was my only defense, in craft and in conduct. The Queen's appreciation for my work was deep and personal. There's a tale of her melancholy lifted by a clock I made, a book-shaped marvel that played gentle music. My influence spread beyond Whitehall. I trained apprentices, sharing my secrets and raising a new generation of English clockmakers. Through them, my techniques shaped the future of English horology. Few of my clocks survive, but those that do are treasures, testaments to skill and artistry. My legacy is not just in objects, but in the very idea of measured, ordered time at the heart of government. I was a refugee who became a trusted craftsman, navigating suspicion and leaving a mark on history. My chimes have faded, but my influence endures. I was the quiet master behind the Queen's time. My work helped shape the rhythm of an age, and in every tick, my story lives on.